The Minding Your Business podcast is brought to you by Brooks Brothers Consulting, Inc. Brooks Brothers Consulting is a development firm that my brother Philip and I started June of 2013 and is going strong. We're making some great headway. 3 areas that we cover: leadership, legacy, and lending. Leadership, legacy, and lending. So leadership from a talent development standpoint with new and existing leaders, whether they're executives, directors, or managers, either one. Lending from a strategic standpoint, personal or business lending. If we can help, we've got access to 4,000 lenders, y'all, across the country, private and public, that are interested in doing really good deals. They've got low rates, great terms, quick turnaround times, that kind of thing. Shout out to my guy John White with Intro Business Solutions, is a partner of mine on that side of the business. And we're looking to partner with you if you're looking at franchise financing, if you're looking at purchasing rental property, whether you're looking to fix and flip or fix and hold and earn the income, whichever one. We've got great programs. You don't have to have the best of credit. You don't have to have the greatest of income, but we've got solutions that strategically can help you. Not just about adding debt, but it's about adding assets, equipment financing, and leasing as well. So get with me on that. That's Brooks Brothers Consulting, Inc. You can go to www.brooksbrothersconsulting.com. Or you can email me directly, ron@brooksbrothersconsulting.com. Today's episode, we're at episode 37, which is called Guns and Butter. So we're going to talk about gun control in the United States, not from a sensationalized political standpoint, but just from old school, uncommon sense. What we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about from a practicality standpoint, not academic, practicality of how you can be proactive and prevent and respond to gun violence in your place of business. But first, we got to kick the music up, so let's do it.
What we do here is go back. All right. This is the Minding Your Business podcast. I'm the host, Ron Brooks. Today is Friday, March the 9th of 2018. It is slowly but surely starting to warm up. We've had a crazy winter. Shout out to everybody on the East Coast that's been hit by some of the hazardous weather that's hit along the East Coast. Got some friends and family up there. Got family actually in New Jersey. And I've got friends in D.C. and New York and all kinds of different places along the East Coast that have taken that hit. Don't forget about Puerto Rico, that's still going through from the storms from last year. Don't forget about Florida, and don't forget about the Houston area as well, as they're still recovering from some of the hazardous weather. And if you've never been through anything like that, I know Memphis doesn't get hit with a ton of that too often. We had the Hurricane Elvis thing that came through about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever it was. But definitely your heart goes out when weather impacts people the way that it does. And it does have a huge impact. It's not as easy as just, picking up stuff and gluing it back together. Ask them in Puerto Rico. When you need assistance like that, and sometimes when the news stops talking about stuff, everybody forgets and goes back to what they were doing. But definitely keep those folks in mind, and if you have an opportunity to be supportive, do that. Speaking of being supportive, this week was in Memphis. We had the
Black Restaurant Week. The Memphis Black Restaurant Week, which was led by Cynthia Daniels and Company, Cynthia Daniels and Co., as they present it. And it's been a phenomenal week. I've had an opportunity to eat at some really good establishments, whether it's G. Austin. Definitely shout out to them. Had a great time with them. Of course, Uptown, down on 2nd Street has been phenomenal. Yesterday I was at Slices of Soul. And man, I ate my pizza so damn fast. I mean, it was ridiculous. So check those places out. If you happen to be in Memphis, you're listening to the podcast, you happen to visit Memphis, those are some great places that you can check out. And there are many restaurants all around town. But shout out to that whole effort. And hopefully what that does is encourage us to continue to support. So you don't have to just eat there this year and don't show up again until next March when Cynthia does it again. You do have the right to go and then support on Monday too, next week and the week after, and in June and in September and in December and so forth. And then when you get back to this time next year, you won't be a stranger because they'll be used to kind of seeing you. But so hopefully that effort with Memphis Black Restaurant Week encourages people to be supportive. Shout out to my sister Jennifer who's watching. King Alfred, what's going on? How you doing, man? And then Cheryl, what's up? So Black Restaurant Week was off the chain. Definitely continue to be supportive of that. I had a great week personally with some endeavors that I'm working on, particularly with Brooks Brothers Consulting, who I shouted out at the beginning. Able to work with what seems to be some major players that I'm starting to get attention of. And you know how growing a business is. It takes time. It's not an overnight thing. Everybody doesn't return your calls. Everybody doesn't return your email. And you have to kind of chase things down and kind of make it work. But if you keep at it, you keep the faith, and you keep progressing, you can be successful, whether it's you're growing your business or you're growing on the job front, whichever one that is. So shout out to everybody that's doing that, and hopefully Friday's kind of towards the end of a week and you've got some great things in store going into next week. Shout out to my man Ojinga Carr, I Dream I Achieve. We talked about this. I had Jason Daniels on a few weeks ago with Titans Electrical. He's going to be a speaker on tomorrow morning along with some other great dynamic speakers. You still have time. I Dream I Achieve. Get with Ojinga Carr, Oginacarr. He's on my friends list on Facebook. If you listen to the podcast, I think it's I Dream I Achieve. That conference started on yesterday, and is going through tomorrow. So definitely shout out to them. That's a great effort. A lot of us work, if you work for companies and things like that, your company pays a couple $1,000s for you to be able to go to these kind of conferences and things like that. So Ojinga's brought that muscle here to Memphis, and it's something that if you're serious about really growing your business and you're not just play pimping out here, this is definitely something to check out. And there's many other things, so I'm not one of those people to try to berate people into doing stuff, but there's so many different things that you can do, that kind of effort and many things around the city. So if you're not successful in Memphis, then you got to go get successful. And one of the things you got to do is you got to get up, you got to get off of social media, you got to get serious about doing some things, and you got to get around the kind of people that are doing things. If you don't change your environment, nothing changes. You don't change, nothing changes. So you got to do something different. Stephanie Boyce, Antonio, what's going on? And again, my guy Zach Wiggs. Zach, I just met with Mike Simpson the other day, man. We were talking about you, man. All good stuff. Reminiscing on some basketball times past. Zach and them were always a tough, along with my frat, Quan, out there at Collierville, man. They weren't no joke out there back in the day. So anyway, so glad you can join. We want to get right into today's content. This is episode 37, and I'm titling this Guns and Butter. And so, a few things I want to jump right in on when it talks about gun control. All right, so when do y'all think the first mass shooting took place in this country? If anybody wanted to take a guess. I'll go ahead and tell you that the very first one that happened on this soil happened in 1764 in Greencastle, Pennsylvania, of all places. Greencastle, Pennsylvania, 10 deaths, 2 injuries. And I'm just going to read to you the description because this is interesting. And this is July 26th of 1754. This is before you even had a United States of America as it's constituted on today. This is when you had more of a colonial kind of America. Everybody learned how to spell colonizers after watching Black Panther, but they learned how to spell it. Enoch Brown School Massacre is what it's called. Perhaps the earliest shooting to happen on school or college property in what would become the United States was the notorious Enoch Brown School Massacre during the Pontiac's War. 4 Delaware American Indians entered the schoolhouse near present-day Greencastle, Pennsylvania, shot and killed schoolmaster Enoch Brown and 9 children. Only 2 children survived. This incident may only incidentally be considered a school shooting because only the teacher was shot, while the other 9 victims were killed with melee weapons. So that's the first one that kind of happened on this soil. The first one that happened in America was November the 12th, 1840. And this is all online. You can research this at CNN.com. This is in Charlottesville, Virginia. So y'all remember Charlottesville, right, from last year. So the first mass shooting on American soil, which was constituted as America, November the 12th, 1840. John Anthony Gardner Davis, a law professor at the University of Virginia, was shot by student Joseph Sims and died from his wound 3 days later. All right, so that is in 1840. All right, so far this year, let's fast forward. Let's get to 2018. All right, so we've gone through this whole history in this country of mass gun violence and just gun violence in general. The most recent school shooting was 2 days ago in Birmingham, Alabama, Huffman High School. A student was killed and another injured when a gun discharged in the school building prompted the school to go into lockdown shortly after the bell rang for school dismissal. A staff member was also treated and released on site. Law enforcement was labeled the shooting as accidental. So that's the most recent shooting. The most recent sensationalized one was in Parkland, Florida, the one that you've heard outside of Orlando, where the 19-year-old student came into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and decided that he was going to that day, or at some point he decided that he was going to kill some folks. He killed 17 people and injured 14 more. And this is the gentleman that his name is Nicholas Cruz, and you've seen him on the news and that kind of thing. So when you think about this, and you think about from the very beginnings of America, we've had gun violence. So this was before. Talk about the early ones now, and whether you say it's more of a problem now or back in the day is your call. But when I look at this list of shootings that's happened in America, it's pretty consistent. Now, in the 1960s, and of course, a lot of things in America changed from about 1920 coming on, and the 60s seemed to be just off the chain. There seemed to be a huge increase in the frequency of mass shootings, kind of somewhat the late 50s, but more so in the 60s and 70s as you start to have various revolutions going on, a lot of backlash and things like that. We don't have to go into that for y'all, but this country has had a problem with guns from the very beginning. From the very beginning. The Second Amendment of the Constitution, which gets held up by the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, it gets held up in high regard anytime that there's any kind of shooting or of a mass appeal where it's covered by the media and things like that. You generally get people that run off with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment reads as follows. For those that often like to run with stuff, what we like to do on this podcast is define things and kind of lay it out there. We don't like to assume. We don't like to go off hearsay and so-and-so said this and I've heard 100 people say it, so now I'm going to say it and not really know what it is. Most people don't know what the Second Amendment says. So I'm going to tell you what it says. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'll read it again. A well-regulated militia, keep that in mind, well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. This was written, of course, the Constitution, which was written back in kind of those early days, 1776, whatever, when Thomas Jefferson and a bunch of folks got together and decided that they were going to break their political ties to Great Britain, and they were going to form this country that we refer to as the United States of America. And these were going to be the governing laws that were going to govern and spell out essentially how people and the government were going to operate and work into some kind of harmony. So, okay. So, again, let's fast forward back to 2018, y'all. And what you've got is this year you've had now 18 or 19 mass shootings. And we're just now in the beginnings, heading towards the middle of March. So we haven't even gotten to springtime. And there's already been approximately 18 to 19 school shootings. So then you ask, okay, what's going on? So, some people say the problem is mental health. And that's what President Donald Trump has, he mentioned, matter of fact, in the Florida shooting, the only thing he mentioned was that it had to be some kind of involvement with mental health that caused the student to go in and attempt to kill people and actually accomplish killing people by use of gun weaponry. Some people say that the issue is video games and movies, and a lot of us came up watching some of the violent movies. I was laughing, when the rappers in the early 90s where it had gangster rap was really popping, and there was this back and forth and kind of this thing, it's okay for Arnold Schwarzenegger to get on TV and make millions of dollars in a movie where he don't say nothing and all he does is shoot people the whole time, and he's probably got 7 or 8 lines in the whole damn movie, right? But he's the biggest movie star at the time, late 80s, early 90s. So I'm sitting there watching something like Terminator 2, and I'm kind of laughing, thinking back to those times and that argument. But of course, we have an obsession with violence in this country that is mostly unmatched. It's mostly unmatched. Let me give you a few facts as it relates to that, because America has what I deem, and this is my opinion, it's a unique kind of gun problem. The United States, and this is per CNN, the United States has nearly 6 times the gun homicide rate of Canada, more than 7 times that of Sweden, and nearly 16 times that of Germany. Here's one of the key things when it comes to America. America makes up 5% of the world's population as of 2016. So the United States of America, so if you take the whole world population, 5% of it lives and resides in the United States of America. Yet Americans represent 42% of the whole world's privately held firearms. So 5% of the population owns 42% of the guns in the world. So what do you think is going to happen? Just by that, you don't get a gun to just have it sit there. And, the Constitution, some have argued that the Second Amendment was designed in case the government went berserk, right? And there was martial law, and, the president or some figure came up and said, we're going to turn on the citizens of the United States, that we need to be able to protect ourselves as people. And so we need to have our guns. Okay, so that's the argument. No matter how you feel about that, that's the argument that's often made. So you're looking at this and you look at these figures. Here's another one. Again, according to CNN's research, the United States, again, 5% of the world's population,
But we have 31% of the global mass shootings. 31%. So almost a third of the mass shootings that take place on the planet Earth take place with human beings that are residing and citizens of the United States of America, even though it only makes up 5% of the population. So when you combine all this together, you kind of get some of what you get to today. Now, again, we could argue all day long about what we think the reasons are. And you can get into the politics of it. You can get into the left and the right and blah, 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 blah. And you can do that and you can fight. People do it here on social media all day long. Here's the gist of it, folks. Do we have a problem? Yes. When you look at things like school shootings, look at the profile of how they're committed. It's not an easy thing to fix. It's not as simple as some have said, and it's a great idea in theory. When you talk about things like metal detectors, for example. Most people discount the price of it because they think, oh, well, the school system's just going to go and just buy it. And maybe they should, right? Here's the thing. Most schools have probably 20 different doors going in and out the school, right? So if you're not going to lock most of them down, then you're still going to have an issue because most of these folks, they're not just walking in the front door and checking in and saying, hey, I'm Bob, mass shooter, and I'm here to kill everybody. Where do I sign in? And they just say, oh, Bob, you just sign in here and then, go shoot who you want. And then once you get done shooting everybody, make sure you come sign out. That's not what's happening, right? These folks are coming in any kind of way through the window, through side doors and all this kind of thing. So putting a metal detector at one set of doors isn't going to fix the problem unless you're going to have a school lockdown where the other doors trigger some kind of alarm or something like that, where you're not allowed to just walk in from anywhere, or open the window, or no one can prop the door open, things like that. A couple weeks ago, I spoke at Cordova High School. I spoke to 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders on their career day. And after I got a chance to do that, I spoke with a couple of the teachers about this very subject. A Shelby County school teacher shared with me that one of the challenges that they have with the school district when it comes to things like this is a door will break. Let's just say a door breaks. And this is no knock on the school system. This is just a reality of a teacher sharing this with me in confidence. That when the door breaks and they put in the request to the school system, and then it takes the school system 4 months to fix the damn door, what happens? This is the door that teachers, may come in, when they're coming in for reporting to duty in the morning. So if they can't swipe their badge and open the door because it's broken, they've got a choice, right? They can either sit there and wait for someone to open it, or they can walk around the school to get to the main entrance. Well, naturally they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to walk all the way around the damn school to go into the school every day, right? So what happens? What's the easy fix? You prop the door open, right? Why do you prop the door open? Because it takes the school system 4 months to replace or come fix the door, if that's true, right? So if that's true, what that leaves a school susceptible to, someone could come through that entrance because it's propped open. Someone gets word of that, someone scopes that out or whatnot. It's the same thing like you have at the bank where people go by. When I was in banking, people would come, they come and they case the bank, right? They look to see where the weak link is, who leaves the door unlocked, and, who's a little lax with this procedure or whatnot. And so then that's what happens. And so one of the challenges, and this isn't limited to obviously Shelby County schools or anything like that. This is probably schools all over America, is that, from a maintenance standpoint, facility standpoint, they have to be really involved in that. It's one thing to have eyes and things like that everywhere and cameras,
And I've always said this: a camera is no good unless a human being's looking at it. A camera is a recording camera is a reactionary solution. Because what happens if nobody's watching it at the time that can act? All you got is watching the situation occur, on a camera. So placing cameras everywhere by themselves doesn't mean anything. Placing cameras with people watching that ain't gonna act doesn't do anything either. Right? So this teacher's sharing with me some of the challenges that they have and things they have to clean up, whether it's, that you have former students walking through schools and things like that. You got students that have been suspended, which is kind of one of my things to look at is when a student's been suspended from school, like they've been suspended for the year, and it was kind of a contentious situation, that needs to be shared across the district so that I'll use myself for example. That keeps me out of trouble. If Ron Brooks is suspended for violating a teacher, let's just say I assault a teacher because he or she gave me a C- on a project. So I assault this teacher and he or she reports me and I go to the office and they suspend me for the school year, right? It's January, I've been suspended for the year. All right? And I walk away. On my way walking away, I tell the teacher, man, you better watch your back. Just be careful out here. So I'm making idle threats, right? That school should have some kind of way that they're documenting that and sharing with other schools. Like if Ron Brooks step on your campus, you need to, call the police or you need to act, right? Because when you look at some of these school shootings, some of these or many of these are like former students that are like recently formed, not like, they graduated a zillion years ago. You're talking about students who graduated the year before who still look like a student. When I was at Cordova High School, some of the teachers I couldn't tell from the students. Some of the teachers were 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, which we didn't have, by the way, growing up. None of my teachers were that young growing up, and probably for a lot of you too. I don't remember having any teacher that was under like 80. No, I'm just kidding. But we didn't have young teachers like that. So I'm looking at teachers that are blending in with the student population, right? So one of the things that you got is if you got someone who just graduated school that had all these issues, everybody around there knows the issues oftentimes, because it's very rare that, we haven't seen an instance where it's just been a straight A student that's involved in activities and things like that, committing these atrocities at these schools. These are kids that have had some level of issue, some kind of antisocial issue or things like that isn't getting addressed by whoever, parents, the schools, a combination of the two. They're not getting addressed. And so what happens then is you run into a situation where now this person is no longer at the school, and you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, they caused this issue now, but there's no real communication, at least that I'm aware of. Now, there may be school systems around that have this. My recommendation would be is you got to have some kind of way that you're sharing this information across a district so that people know. In that example, Ron Brooks has threatened and now been kicked out of school. The other schools need to know with a picture of Ron Brooks that says, hey, you got to, he comes on campus, anything like that, you got to deal with him. Now, that's difficult if you got 19, 20-year-old Ron that looks like these students, and the students know him because, think about it. The folks, that were freshmen and sophomores when he was there are now juniors and seniors when he come walking on campus. And he still looked like them because he's still young enough. And what stops him from just walking in with a group of students getting off the bus and now he's in, right? So, it's not the easiest kind of thing until you start getting into the, technology of like Minority Report and things like that, where you're going to start predicting what people will do before they do it, which is extremely scary. Yeah, that was that movie with Tom Cruise or whatever. But that, so that's the thing. You're gonna have to. It's gonna have to be a widespread effort. That's gonna, there's no one thing. Giving a teacher a gun is not the solution. Matter of fact, the same teachers that I was talking to at Cordova High, many of them said if they were given a gun, they're gonna quit. I talked to a business colleague down in Atlanta whose wife is a teacher. She said the same thing to him. The day they give her a gun is the day she leaves. Why? So sure, in theory, can the teacher, maybe thwart a situation? Sure, they definitely could. They could, right? The other thing that, usually with these school shooters, it's amateur night at the Apollo, right? So if you show up with a gun or the teacher's got a gun, it can cause somewhat more of a threat because now you spooked the shooter because now you got a weapon, right? So now he starts shooting and you sitting up there with the kids. The whole thing with the school shooting is you want to hopefully let him get out as quick as possible. You want him out of there. You're not trying to sit in there. You don't want no cowboy administrator, that wants to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, and wants to be Clint Eastwood, and he want to get up there and start having a shootout with a mass shooter. Another thing is, if you look at the frequency of mass shootings in schools, it's not that frequent. It's not that frequent. And so, so most of the time, there's a great chance it's not going to happen. That's just what the math suggests. It's one of those things that's like when a plane crashes, people get kind of up in arms. It's one of those things. Planes don't crash that often. Not near as much as cars wreck, but people just have this inherent fear because when the plane crashes, more likely than not, you die, right? And folk don't want to die. They won't go to heaven. They don't want to die. So it's the same thing with school shootings. It creates a mass fear, right? Because of those things that I mentioned. There's so many different ways to get in there and do something. Let's see. Jennifer Beach, my sister, says, no. Need guns with proper training. People forget about the training. That's right, sis. That's the whole issue that teachers had, besides just even having them to begin with. What's going to happen the first time a teacher blows a kid's head off for not sitting down and shutting up? What you think is going to happen? The first time a gun goes off in a classroom and the teacher's sitting there with the license and responsible. The first time a kid takes a gun from a teacher and does a mass shooting. Right? What's going to happen? You could end up having an increase in shootings. Because guess what? The people that's going to do it are right there in the school. They just go into the teacher's drawer, pry it open. They get the gun. In some cases already loaded. And they just go and start shooting. But, that's not solving anything. And why are you going to put that pressure on a teacher? Y'all paying teachers $35,000, $40,000, $45,000 a year to deal with y'all knucklehead children. And on top of that, they need to now carry a pistol. The teacher now carry. She got to deal with folks. Some of these school systems have classes where you got one teacher and 30 kids, right? And then now he or she now has to get trained to carry a gun, and is going to have that to try to prevent some things. What happens when what happens if they get to fighting in the classroom, and she wants a teacher gets so frustrated she pulled a gun out, shoot it in the sky, shoot it through the through the ceiling, and hit a kid on the second floor, or a teacher or somebody on the second. It doesn't really make sense, and when you scope it out again with some old school uncommon sense. It doesn't really make sense. But Jennifer's exactly right. You would still have to have the training. That's where, when you talk about training, that's where I think another area that schools can look at is they can look at how they can incorporate, maybe ex-military and things like that. That's now civilians living in the community. To be patrolled at the school and kind of walk through. They don't need to be dressed up to the T and yada. They're just, ordinary, civilian men and women who have been trained and licensed to carry weapons that, they could be incorporated. Now, that requires a whole lot of organization. I know that, and you got to get into compensation and blah, 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 blah. I understand that. Just thinking out loud, it's just better than equipping the teacher with that. So, let's see. Training decreases the chances of negligent discharges, accidents, and etc. Exactly. Yeah, so you have to have some level of training, but I still disagree with a teacher having a gun in the classroom. I just think for a small sample size of what you're trying to prevent, you increase the sample size of, maybe not such a mass shooting, but maybe it's a shooting that happens now more often in the classroom. Either, a student brings a gun, shoots at the teacher shoots back at him, vice versa. A threat is made. You get teachers that have issues. It creates a whole nother brouhaha of issues, in my opinion. So when you look at this whole thing, with gun control, it's you can wreck your brain with all kinds of statistics and with thinking of solutions and things like that. Does video games and movies and things like that have an impact? Sure, they may. They very well may. I think access is more of the thing. And so when you talk about gun control, here's an example. In Chicago, Illinois, I believe in 2016, according to some of the U.S. data, some of the crime data up there in Chicago, Illinois, there were like 4,000 crimes that were committed with a firearm. Of those, Chicago rated very high in terms of cities in America with gun deaths and that kind of thing. What's interesting with that, when you look at Chicago, is Chicago has some of the most stringent gun laws in the country. The city of Chicago, Illinois. Some of the most stringent, gun laws that you'll ever find is in Chicago, Illinois. No doubt about it. This is why at the state and local level, you can't fight this, per se, just at that level. It can't just be fought at the state level. You had 4,000 victims in Chicago to gun-related crime. Chicago is very strict. It may not be the strictest, but it's very strict. The reason it's strict is because you have to have more than just a gun license. There's all kinds of, there's like a firearm owner's ID card that you have to have. You got a background check. You got a 3-day waiting period, blah, 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 blah. Here's the problem, y'all. Chicago is wedged between Wisconsin to a little bit to the kind of northwest. If you're coming from downtown Chicago, you can ride up just a little bit to the northwest and you get into the state of Wisconsin. If you go down to the southeast from downtown Chicago, you hit Gary, Indiana, right? Just outside, home of the Jacksons, Michael Jackson and the whole Jackson 5 and Janet and everybody. Gary, Indiana. All right. In Indiana, you can buy a gun. There's really no law that prevents private sale of firearms. None at all in the state of Indiana. So you can go from Chicago just, 20, 30 miles down the road southeast of Chicago from downtown. You get into Indiana and you don't face any of those hurdles. So there's not a whole lot of paper trail, things like that. You could just kind of go there and just kind of get it. You got these states now where you don't even have to really pass a background check or submit paperwork or have any delays or anything like that. So what do people do? Just like they do with alcohol and everything else. What they're doing with marijuana in some of those states, like Colorado, where it's wedged between 3 and 4 different states. What are they doing? Hey, hit the border, baby. They're hitting the border. And they're going into these other states where it's more lax. And there you go. So it's difficult to fight it at that level
because of that. In 2014, the Chicago Police Department, I'm going to read you this fact, this is from CNN. In 2014 report by CPD, which is Chicago Police Department, nearly 60% of the guns in crime scenes that were recovered and traced between 2009 and 2013 came from outside the state. 60%. If it was 10 of them, 6 of them came from outside the state. About 19% of that 60% came from Indiana. It's the most common state of origin for guns outside of Illinois. So obviously, if you're in Chicago, Illinois is the highest. But 19% of them came from Indiana. Neighboring state. Just down the street, when you're in Chicago. So that makes it difficult, y'all, from that standpoint. So, the whole idea behind, gun control is not to get caught up in the political sensationalized nature of it. Fox News versus CNN and President Donald Trump versus President Barack Obama and blah, 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 blah. And everybody's looking at who's to blame and who can take the heat for this and, all the time. And they sucker the masses into that all the time. All the time. So when you look at that, you got kids in school, you're a taxpayer, so you contribute to the school system in a positive way and that kind of thing. There's got to be a meeting of the minds, and it's going to take a lot of your resources to make sure that you've got certain things in place. But one of the big things is going to be awareness. Sticking a gun in everybody's hand is not necessarily the solution, even with training. Because the teachers already, think about how many in-service days you're going to have, when you got to train teachers for guns. Y'all think y'all got to take off from work now? Hell, wait till they have to have an in-service day on freaking Wednesday that you got to take off from work because your kids can't go to school because they're sending all the teachers for firearm training. Wait till they drop that nugget on y'all and then see how y'all feel about that. About teachers having guns when they got to do that 2, 3, maybe 4 times out the year. Because it ain't no one-time training and then all of a sudden you're good. Those that own guns, that are firearm enthusiasts and things like that, they know they go train on them things all the time. You have to. If you want to be an avid shooter and you want to be well-trained and things like that, ask anybody that's in law enforcement or anything like that. You have to train for that all the time. You can't go to one class and be good for life. Particularly when you're sitting in there with people's kids. Anywhere from 5 to, 17, 18 years old. You better damn well be getting trained. And they're not doing it on the weekend. So guess when they're going to do that? During the week. And them in-service days, they already got those set. So now you're going to be adding in these days of training for teachers and administrators on firearms. Then y'all really going to be ticked off. Y'all will be upset. Tiffany Bramble, how you doing? Daryl James, what's going on? Timothy Holcomb. Tracy. Ron Lewis, the frat coming in. Andrea, what's going on, Muffin? Pam, how you doing? Nia. Again, happy birthday to Nia from earlier this week. Man, that girl's crazy too, man. She had me, cracking up with some of her stuff on here. But for those listening to the podcast, I'm just shouting out the folks on Facebook Live. So let's get into real quick from a business perspective. So we talked about gun control for the mass shootings with education and that kind of thing. Here's the thing, and I know many people that don't have storefronts and they don't have brick and mortar and things like that, but you do business in them. You do business in co-working facilities. You do business at the library, Starbucks, coffee shops, restaurants. You may have your own office. Wherever it is that you're doing business, you want to hear this out because gun violence isn't just limited to the school. It isn't limited to the school or the church or the concert or anywhere that people can be gathered is an opportunity for something like that to happen. If you're a business owner
here's the thing, and I've owned property, so I'm not talking about something I done read, right, or something somebody told me. I'm talking about things that I know because I've done it. That's the difference. I'm not academic, right? So take all that. The academics is when all the inputs are fixed. Here's what's ideal likely to happen. Then you've got the real world, right? So it's like basketball practice. If when you're running, how if you play basketball and for those that played, when you're practicing a new play and, coach calls all 5 guys or girls, whatever, on the court and you run it on air, no defenders, right? So everybody goes exactly where they're supposed to be and blah, blah, blah. And coach always would say this. He said, look, there's, you throw the ball to an area. Look, there's nobody there. That's what my coach used to say. Look, Ronnie B, there's nobody there. He's going to be open. And if he doesn't work, then you've got this release valve and blah, blah, blah. That works well in theory. In practice, when you're running it on air. In the game, like Allen Iverson said, not practice, the game. In the game. Don't work that way. Because what happens? Now you've got 2,000 people watching you. There's a referee. You got your jersey on. The other team is foreign to you. You don't see them every day. They react to things different, not the way that they did in practice. Right? And the situation, depending on the environment, is different in practice. And it's different than in practice when you're running the play against your JV team. Right? Now you're running against somebody else's A team. You're the A team, you're running against somebody else's A team. So that's why I say, I don't get into the academics of it. I get into the practicality of it. El Mac, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining, brother. So here's the deal. What I'm getting into is when you talk about from a business perspective. So, I've owned commercial property and things like that. So if you're a business owner and you have property, you need to make sure a few things when you talk about helping to be proactive about preventing gun violence. The first thing is you need to have a policy of, where your entrances and exits are. And for some buildings, that's easy if you've got, one exit in the front, one in the back, things like that, or, whatever it is. And facilities people know this, but I'm talking about the small business man and woman that owns commercial property, whether your business is in it or you own it and you've got tenants throughout the building. One of the things you got to make sure of is that all your tenants understand where the entrances and exits are. Right? That sounds simple, but I'm telling you, people, they don't know. And then what happens is something happens, everybody trying to run dash for the front door. That's where the shooter's at. Right? So you need to be able to know where the entrances and exits are. Right? You need to be able to know law enforcement communication numbers. Another thing that seems simple, but I guarantee you people will go and they think 911, right? And you should. That's the simple part, right? But you've got your local precinct and things like that that's right there too that can probably get there and move a little bit faster. And I saw this with a building I had in Midtown where the precinct, I got a building on Madison, the precinct's on Union Avenue. And for those of the podcast, that's here in Memphis. And I called the precinct, and that moves way faster than 911. Because I got someone at the precinct on the phone like that, and they jetted over there quick. So you need to know 911, the fire department, all those different, the ambulance, all those different, the hospital, things like that. You need to have visibility. So let's just say you're a business owner and you've got your business in a building or in a bay. You got a retail bay or something like that. Or you got an office. You need to make sure that's not cluttered. I mean, how many times have you walked into retail places and there's clothes on the floor, it's hangers and all this kind of stuff everywhere? That prevents barriers for you if something did go down. You got people tripping over stuff and, there's not clear walk pathways and things like that. So as you align your business, you merchandise in your business. Try to take advantage of some vertical merchandising on the walls and things like that I see people do. That's good. But you got to make sure that you have clear walkways, right, that allow to usher, so to speak, people traffic. Right? Because one of the worst things to do is, on a day when you've got a crowded building or crowded store, something goes down and you got people running into each other and running all over the place because there's no room. So you can't just have this congested kind of thing. Make sure that in your building, whether you're renting the building for somebody, you own it, or whatever it is that you're doing, y'all make sure that you've got clear visibility and pathway. Another thing is, when you talk about visibility, is when people can, when it's easy for people to hide, things like that. You don't want angles where people can hide, right? You go into retail places, they got this big tail display sitting in there that's easy for someone to go behind there, pull a pistol out, pull a knife, do that kind of thing. So you do some of this stuff for shrinkage purposes to prevent stealing and destroying of your asset property and things like that. But also you need that to prevent and discourage someone from feeling like they can come in and make a quick move on you or make a quick move on your people. So watch your visibility. Another thing is cameras, and I talked about cameras earlier. Invest in cameras, y'all. You can get a nice camera system off Amazon for probably about $400 or $500. Now I know there's gonna be those folks. Well, I don't have $400 or $500. You probably don't need to be starting your business. If you're gonna be in a building and you're not gonna have $400 or $500 to protect your employees, yourself, you don't have employees yourself, family, whoever's going to be in there, and your clients and prospects, if they're not worth that $400 or $500 investment, you probably need to reconsider, reassess. But invest in that. Even just take, $30 a week and just start putting it aside. Adds up real quick. But have cameras and get good cameras. Don't get them fuzzy tail cameras that don't get you a good camera with a good HD visibility, night vision, something you definitely need to have. But have cameras and make sure that when people know from the jump, you're being watched. And so banks and casinos have that down pat, right? Because ain't nowhere you going in no bank that ain't no camera watching you, and damn sure in no casino. There's a camera on everything. You don't see them, but there's a camera every angle. They got every angle of you all over. And so when that's understood in your business, it helps protect and give a peace of mind. But anybody that's going to come to try to conduct some type of violence, it's a preventative nature. Now, like I said earlier, y'all, a camera is only as good as somebody watching it that's going to act. What's up, Chandra Barnes? How you doing? What's going on? A camera ain't no good with nobody watching it. It's just a camera recording. And then a camera ain't no good if it's not recording to house the footage. If it's just running, you need to connect it to something that's saving the footage, and you need to be watching it. And if you see something, or you got somebody hired that's supposed to be watching and they see something, they got to act. Not just be looking at it and, they ain't look like he got a pistol. No, you got to be acting. You got to do something. You know what I mean? So those are some areas where, you start looking at, how you can prevent some of these things. Now, let's just say something does happen. Scotty, what's up, brother? Scotty Lackland. Let's just say something does happen. So you have an act of violence. Before I get to that, another thing that you've got to look at, and this is from a leadership standpoint within the business. So before I get to what I was going to say, let me say this. You've got to make sure that you're ahead of any issues. And what I mean by that is you've got to make sure that you are ahead of issues between people. If a customer makes a threat towards an employee or to you, that's got to be documented and it's got to be reported. Plain and simple. If you or an employee make a threat towards a customer or a vendor or anybody else, that needs to be documented and reported. There's got to be a channel for that. Because, a lot of, just as much as you have school shootings, you have, what they call, going postal, which everybody kind of somewhat made light of, but because it resulted from a situation at the post office some years back. But those things are real, and there's a lot of threats and things like that. But when those things happen, you've got to be able to document it with the facts quickly, and you got to be able to take action. So if you're in an office building, let's just say you got an office and other people got offices too. You're in this office building, you got an office, and there's 30 other offices on the floor and whatever. And down the hall, 2 people are getting into it pretty bad. And they're making threats and they talking crazy and all that. That's got to be documented some kind of place. Because if something happens, you need to be able to go back to that documentation, or it's got to be reported through the proper channels. And if you're an owner, you need to make sure that your tenants can get with you to report those kind of things if they have issues. I had a tenant in a building in Midtown that I had at one point in time. And there was an issue like that. There was a woman who came in that would antagonize, and she would insult other clients and customers and things like that. And she got hold of the owner's name, and she would name drop him and tell him about he's no good and he's this and he's that, and just kind of being real obnoxious and threatening in some ways. And they got that information. They documented the days and the times and when she came in. We got it handled. I promise you, we got that handled. Because I'm not trying to interrupt my relationship with a tenant. So I had to showcase that I was willing to do what was necessary to address that expeditiously, right? And so that gave them that level of confidence. So I encourage you, if you happen to own property or you're going to own property in the future, say you're someone that's looking to get into owning commercial property, which I highly recommend if you've got the stomach to do it. You got to make sure that you encourage your tenants to route things and have a channel, whether it's by phone or by web, some kind of form or something, that you can get that with footage so that you can help them address it. And you become a partner in helping address that. And that creates a nice relationship, two-way relationship with your tenant. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. So as we kind of get towards the conclusion of this, I wanted to make sure that from a business standpoint, y'all take this serious. If you're in a place, you're in Wolf Chase Mall, you're in wherever you are, you have an awareness of what's going on and be prepared to report it. Because it's serious kind of stuff. My daughter, my oldest daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, came to me after the February shooting that was in Florida, and she seemed to be a little, concerned about it and things like that. Didn't quite understand why somebody would want to do that and want to harm people. And it's kind of interesting with my girls because they're getting to that age where they're becoming not only self-aware, but kind of more aware of the macro environment. It's not just limited to their school and home and auntie's house and things like that, or Nana's house. The world's becoming a little bit bigger to them, and they're seeing that how these things could impact. So she came to me one day, and I could tell something was bothering her. So I said, hey baby, what's going on? And she started sharing with me that she was concerned about what her school was going to do about preventing violence, and hopefully nobody came into the school to do anything like that, and yada 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 yada. And so I told her, I said, you have every right to be concerned. So I asked her what she thought about a solution, and of course, she shared that with me in her own way, and it was good to see her critically think at the level that she critically thinks right now. To critically think through what she thinks a solution. Her solution was just get rid of all the guns. And obviously that's a noble bottom line solution, although it has its natural flaws, of course, given where we are in this country. But, so I commended her for her thought and kind of critically thinking through that at 8 years old. But I explained to her to be watchful of what's going on, be cognizant of your environment, and if you see someone that looks like they don't belong, you need to raise your hand and let a teacher or let administrator or whoever that's around, an adult, know if you see something that's out of line, whether there's an adult that's hanging around the playground, or any of that kind of stuff, right? That funny business, or you see someone walking down the hall in school that maybe shouldn't be there, or the after school program, whatever that is, man. To make sure that you address that. So your kids are having maybe these conversations with you, or if they're not, you should have it with them that this thing is serious, but they should not be pessimistic or fearful. But they should be proactive and watch, and then hold your school accountable and the school district if you need to protection, not just solely with mass shootings, but with any kind of level of violence or bullying or any of those kind of things. Not to, again, make it a hashtag sensationalized effort, but just natural, holding the feet to the fire and the accountability and the investment in making sure that those things are protected. In your business, you walk into a business, you own a business, you're in a place, you got to be mindful, and you've got to be in the protection mindset and look at things from a visibility that you're protecting not just your assets, but the lives of yourself, your staff, and your employees. So hope this has been helpful content today. This is the Minding Your Business podcast. I am the host, Ron Brooks. Shout out and thanks to everybody here on Facebook Live, man, all my friends, colleagues, things like that, man. I appreciate y'all. But hopefully this was good content that you could go back and listen to over and over again. Share this amongst your network. If I can answer any questions or add a value, certainly let me know. But man, we're just going to keep moving along. That's what we're going to do. And this is definitely a topic close to everybody's heart, given what's occurred in this country. So, what up, sis, Mickey Renee? How you doing? Minding Your Business podcast, Ron Brooks. I'm signing off on a Friday. Next week, I want to get into a little bit of my story. I've got some things I want to share, some content that is really going to knock y'all socks off next week. I'm going to share some things a little more personal about myself and how I got into business and kind of how I got to where I'm at. So it's a wild ride. It's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. It might be a little sad, but it's all good either way because I'm still here. I'm still living, baby. We're doing our thing. Minding Your Business podcast, Ron Brooks. Make sure you check out the other podcasts that I've mentioned, buyblackpodcast.com, The Startup Life. Check those out. Let's do business with each other. Black Restaurant Week still going strong. Keep that going. I've got a networking meeting for those here in Memphis. Agents of Exchange. It's going to be Wednesday at the Hub Coffee House in High Point Church. That's 6,000 Briarcrest. You can get your tickets at Eventbrite, Agents of Exchange here in Memphis, and you can check it out on Facebook. Ron Brooks, I'm signing off, y'all. Peace.